This morning is Luke chapter 5, verses 1 through 11. Jesus calls his first disciples. One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge two boats, left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of them, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. And when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. And then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him.
Thank you, Sue. Well, good morning, everyone. It was the greatest catch of their lives. Simon and his friends, the Zebedee boys, James and John, they had been partners in this fishing venture for God knows how long. It was the greatest catch they ever had. It nearly sunk all their boats, and it was the last day that they would fish for fish in the sea. This is something that Justo Gonzalez, a biblical scholar and preacher and pastor, he invites us to consider this. It's whenever we hear this story of Jesus calling the first disciples, we always notice the same things, right? Jesus says, "From now on, you will catch people," and they leave behind their nets and they leave everything behind. It says their families, they leave everything behind to follow Jesus. But Justo Gonzalez makes sure that we notice they choose to leave it all behind on the most prosperous day of their entire fishing careers. Apparently, they'd been fishing all night and they caught nothing. Now, I don't know much about fishing. I'm not a great fisher person. So, any of you here in the Zoom room who know more than I do, you can correct me if this is wrong. But what it sounds like is they were fishing all night in the shallow part of the water as fish were coming out to find food for themselves. They'd go after the little bugs on the water. And so they go fishing at night to try to catch them in the shallow water. They caught nothing all night. And by the time Jesus shows up with his crowd that he's teaching, and they're washing their nets, they're packing it in, they've done their duty for the day. Jesus actually has to tell them where to drop their nets. This is one of my favorite things about the disciples. They're bumbling, they never do anything right, including their own jobs. Jesus is a better fisher person than any of them. Jesus teaches them to go out into in the deep water, and drop your nets. That's where the fish are. And they haul in such a huge catch that it nearly sinks their boats. They're not blown away by what God is doing. They see God in this. They know that this is not a normal thing to happen. Very rarely have they ever seen it go out, fish all night, catch nothing, drop your nets in the deep water, haul in all these fish. They know God is responsible for this. It's something that's so amazing that it calls Simon to throw himself at Jesus' feet and proclaim himself a sinner. He's not worthy of this amazing thing happening. But there's something in the miracle that gives them pause. There's something in the miracle that doesn't allow them to stop with, "Wow, now we've had the biggest catch of our entire lives. We are the most successful fishermen in all of Galilee." They don't stop there. There's something in the abundance of the miracle that causes them to pause their lives and say, "What else might we have been missing? And they leave everything behind and they follow after Jesus. And these are the disciples after which we are called to model ourselves and live our lives. In our tradition, in the UCC, we put a lot of emphasis on the gifts of the disciples. What are the gifts that God has given you? You hear me ask it every Sunday. Every Sunday that I'm with you, whenever there's a time of offering, I make sure to highlight that we're not just offering our money, we're called to offer all of our gifts in service of God's world. But this story isn't really focused on our individual unique gifts. This story is focused on something else. It's focused on obedience. The miracle is so abundant and powerful that Simon and John and James, they just drop what they're doing and they follow after Jesus to see what else they've been missing. They are obedient to Christ's call. Christ said to them, "You will no longer fish for fish. You will now go out and catch people." And they are obedient to that. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a theologian during World War II in Germany. He's a German theologian and pastor and preacher, and he ran his own seminary for a while. And he wrote in his book called Costly Discipleship, he wrote this: "Only one who believes is obedient, and only one who is obedient believes. The first step of obedience makes Simon leave his nets. And later on, when his name is Peter, he'll do more than that. He'll get out and walk on water. In the book of Acts, he will go on to actually catch people. He'll be the first person to proclaim a Christian sermon in public. He'll be the first one to baptize non-Jewish people into the faith. So the first step for him is obedience. Obedience calls upon all of us. Obedience is what calls upon the young man to leave his riches. Only this new existence created through obedience can make faith possible. So Dietrich Bonhoeffer would say to us that it's obedience first. It's our ability and desire to heed Christ's call. That creates the space where we can discover all the other things, where we can discover our gifts for ministry, where we can discover the unique and special things that God has planted in us that are unrepeatable, that no other disciple has. But the way Bonhoeffer describes it is obedience has to come first. Obedience is what creates the space in which we journey with Jesus. We walk with God. We start a dialogue. We start a relationship. And it's in that space that we come to discover faith. Obedience actually has to come first. I've been thinking a lot about this as your interim pastor, especially over the last few months. Not only are we busily putting together our profile so we can begin searching for your new settled pastor, but we're doing a lot of work across the board at this church to figure out how to clarify our sense of mission, our sense of boundaries, our sense of roles and responsibilities. And one of the things that's come up in conversation is membership in this church. What does it mean to be a member at Acton Congregational Church? And this is directly out of your bylaws. This is out of Article 3, membership. And it says this: membership in this church shall be open without prejudice to any person who has been baptized or has made a public confession of Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior. Members shall pledge themselves to endeavor to live the Christian life, to attend the regular worship of the church and the observance of the Lord's Supper, to share in the life and the work of the church, to contribute to its support and benevolences, and to seek diligently the spiritual welfare of the membership and the community. That's what is required of membership. So just to be clear, there are some specific things. Members shall pledge themselves, members shall pledge themselves to endeavor to live the Christian life. Let's put a pin in that. And then there's some specific things. Members will attend regular worship of the church. Thank you to all of you who are here in the Zoom room. Not even snow will stop us. So regular worship, the observance of the Lord's Supper, so attend communion services on the first Sunday of every month, to share in the life and the work of the church. That is, again, thank you to all of you who serve on our committees, who serve as officers in this church, who are really sharing in the life and the work that we are currently doing, and to contribute to its support and benevolences, and to seek diligent. So thank you to all of you who give money. Thank you to all of you who have done some estate planning and possibly set aside some gifts for Acton Congregational Church in your will, and to seek diligently the spiritual welfare of the membership and the community. Well, you all do that all the time. No church that I know of prays as regularly or as diligently as you all do for one another. So thank you for being so gifted in that respect. But there's that opening phrase that I think leaves a lot of room for interpretation. The Christian life, endeavor to live the Christian life. What does that mean in the 21st century? If we were Catholic, it would probably mean going to confession on a regular basis. If we were part of an evangelical faith, there might be a certain number of hours you're expected to clock preaching the word on a street corner or trying to bring people to an altar call for faith. We might have some stats, some numbers that we're after. What does it mean for Acton Congregational Church? What does it mean to live the Christian life? If we were in worship, in the sanctuary, I would expect to have a little back and forth, but I know it's not so easy on Zoom. But if anybody has any ideas you'd like to offer, now's a good time. If you wanted to unmute and share, what does it mean to you to live the Christian life in this time and place?
To me, it means to show your obedience to God and your willingness to live somewhat sacrificially like Jesus did for us, and to give to your neighbor and assist people, and to just try and live an exemplary life and follow the prescriptions of the Bible.
Thank you, Jill. So again, Jill is emphasizing obedience, sharing that Bonhoeffer idea that it's in the space of obedience that we learn more about our faith, and being willing to be sacrificial as Jesus was sacrificial, pouring out life for others as Jesus did for us. Thank you, Jill. Anybody else have any ideas to share? Bruce, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, am I unmuted?
You're unmuted. We can hear you. It's great to hear you.
Oh, good. Okay. Good morning. Thank you for your prayers and words today.
Thank you.
The Christian life. This is something that I've struggled with from the early days of my being a Christian. And I began always thinking that the Christian life was something high and lofty that I could never live up to. So it's interesting how over the years my definition has changed, and it's become something that I can be and live up to. It may change, but it's constant. And I don't want to echo the same words that Jill just said, but very much so doing as much as I can for others, helping where I can, and being involved in my church and doing what I can to help others, being prayerful and being available.
And you do a great job of that, Bruce. Thank you so much. I love that. So doing as much as I can for others, finding a role to play, and doing as much as I can for others. And Bruce serves as a deacon among us, and he's certainly finding ways of doing exactly that. Thank you so much for your service and for your faith, Bruce. And thank you for that confession that we think of living the Christian life. It sounds lofty, it sounds aspirational. And I like that you described, earlier in my life, I didn't think I was worthy of this or able to do it, but now you're finding your way. I really appreciate that. Anyone else have any thoughts to share? Jonathan.
Well, I was thinking about, when we come together and we're in fellowship with each other, and we're supporting each other and loving each other, and we take on the mantle of faith. And so my thought is, part of living the Christian life is for there to be a consistency in our lives between that feeling that we have, that sense of God's presence when we're together in person, and to be that same person outside of that space. to continue to have that mantle of faith wherever we go.
I love that. So living the Christian life actually helps build up some practices and muscle memory and response time, so that we're the same person in church, gathered together on a Sunday morning, as we are when we're getting cut off in traffic on a Wednesday afternoon. Am I hearing that right?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate that. Yeah. So developing a consistency. I like that very much. Anyone else? Well, there will be other times to respond to this question, because from everything I see, not just in this church, but in all churches, we are living, you hear me say this all the time, we're living in an interim time. We're living in an in-between time. It used to be the case that people would know you're Christian because they knew you're going to attend worship every Sunday morning. Or Lent, the season of Lent is coming up, and there are some traditions in which everybody was eating fish on Friday nights, and so that's a indicator of your faith or your religion. Living in a time where there is not this consistency that Jonathan spoke about. We're living in a time where we really emphasize individual uniqueness and gifts, and we're less articulate about the need for obedience. We're less articulate about what is actually asked of you to join this church. We know regular worship is expected, sharing in the communion meal, which that's not just about like packing the church on the first Sunday of the month. When you think about what actually sharing in communion is, it's learning to forgive your neighbor. It's learning to offer mercy to others. There's many traditions in which you're not allowed to come to communion on Sunday if there's any active conflict going on between you and your fellow Christians in the church. You got the old adage is you have to seek forgiveness from others before you seek forgiveness from God. So eating communion together, it's not just about being there on the first Sunday of the month. It's actually practicing, inviting this forgiveness and mercy into your life so that it's flowing out of you, not just coming to you. Obviously giving, being benevolent towards the church. We ask for money because we are a self-funded operation. Without your dollars and your contributions and your donations, we run out of money to pay for heating, to pay for electricity or internet, or pay for your staff, your pastor, your music director. So all of these things, we get them, we understand them. But over the next several weeks, throughout Lent and into Easter, we're going to emphasize what are the other things that we look for? What are the things that really mark a member of this church? And we just heard some of them right now: seeking consistency, doing as much as we can, living a sacrificial life. And in the upcoming 10 days or so, there's going to be an email going out, and everyone will be able to respond to this question: what does it mean to live the Christian life? And throughout Lent and Easter, we're going to explore some of these ideas, so that when we come into the Easter season, we might have a better way of naming, here's what membership of our church looks like. Doesn't mean that it's what it's going to look like at every church, but here at Acton Congregational Church, we're going to get a little bit more specific about what it means to be an active, engaged, fully vested covenant member or associate member. I recognize that there's those distinctions in your bylaws. So that's where we're heading. Because this story that we read this morning, the disciples, it's not about their gifts. They don't do anything right. They don't even do their normal everyday jobs right. Jesus has to correct them on all fronts. So in the weeks to come, we're going to be finding this space of obedience where we actually discover more about who God has made us to be. Once I start talking at a computer screen, I find it hard to stop. So I will stop. Yeah. Thank you all for your faithfulness and for being here. Let's enter into a time of prayer. Let's hear what you are carrying with you on your hearts and in your spirits. We know it is possibly not as bad as some of us were fearing, but it is snowy and cold. So, of course, we are offering our prayers this morning for everyone who needs God the most, those who have a hard time affording ways of heating their home, those who might be without power, those who are feeling isolated and stranded on a day like today. God is with them. God is with us. What other prayers do you bring this morning?